AGUIS. Today, I will explain Greek MYTHS. LETS start. Before there were cities of marble and temples of shining stone. Before heroes carried swords and gods threw lightning from the sky. There was only silence. In the beginning, the ancient Greeks believed there was chaos. Not chaos as we think of it today. Not noise, not destruction, but a deep, endless emptiness. A dark space without shape, without time, without light. No earth beneath the feet. No sky overhead. No sea, no stars, no wind. Just a vast, silent void stretching forever. From that emptiness, something began to stir. Out of chaos came Gaia, the earth. She was not born in a cradle. She simply appeared, solid and powerful, rising from the void. She was the ground beneath all things, the soil, the mountains, the valleys yet to be shaped. She was life waiting to happen. Then came Tartarus, the deep abyss far below, darker than darkness itself, and Eros, the force of desire, the invisible power that would drive creation forward. Even in the earliest myths, love was not gentle. It was a force, a push, a spark that made beings come together and create more life. Gaia, alone yet powerful, brought forth Uranus, the sky. He rose above her, vast and endless, stretching in all directions. He covered her completely. Together, earth and sky became the first great pair. And from their union came the first generation of powerful beings. These were the Titans. They were enormous, ancient, and strong beyond imagination. There was Oceanus, who would become the endless river encircling the world. Hyperion, linked to the light of the sun. Theia, whose brightness would later shine through the moon and dawn. And among them, one Titan would become more important than all the others, Cronus. But before Cronus ruled, before Zeus threw thunderbolts, before Olympus stood tall above the clouds, there was fear. Uranus, the sky, looked upon his children and did not like what he saw. Some of Gaia's children were not beautiful Titans. Some were strange and terrifying. The Cyclopes, giant beings with a single eye in the center of their foreheads, and the Hecatoncheires, creatures with 100 hands and 50 heads, beings of overwhelming power and wild strength. Uranus feared them, and fear in the world of Greek myth often leads to cruelty. He pushed these monstrous children deep into Gaia's body, hiding them away in darkness. Imprisoned, buried, unable to see light. Gaia felt the pain of this. The weight of her imprisoned children tore at her from within. She was the earth, solid and strong, but even she could not bear endless suffering. So she made a plan. From her own substance, she shaped a sickle, sharp, curved, and deadly. Then she spoke to her Titan children. She asked them to rise against their father, to stop his cruelty. Most were afraid. Only one stepped forward, Cronus. He was the youngest of the Titans, but he was bold, ambitious. His eyes burned with quiet determination. took the sickle from his mother's hands. And when Uranus came down to cover Gaia once more, Cronus struck. In the darkness, with one swift motion, he attacked his father. The sky groaned. The universe trembled. Uranus was overthrown. From the blood that fell upon the earth, new beings were born, the Furies, spirits of vengeance, the giants, fierce and towering. And from the foam of the sea, where his blood touched the waters, one day would rise Aphrodite, goddess of beauty. But that story belongs to later. For now, the sky had fallen silent. Cronus became ruler of the cosmos. The Titans took their places. The imprisoned Cyclopes and Hecaton chairs were freed for a time, and the world entered a new age, the age of the Titans. Under Cronus, there was order, a strange, ancient calm. Later poets would call it a golden age, a time when humans, not yet burdened by suffering, lived simply and without fear. The earth gave food freely. There was no war, no aging, no pain. But peace built on violence does not last forever, because Cronus had heard a prophecy. Just as he had overthrown his father, one of his own children would overthrow him. The words echoed in his mind like distant thunder. He could not escape them. In Greek myth, prophecies are not suggestions. They are threads woven into fate itself. Cronus married his sister Rhea. Together, they began to have children. The first child was born. Cronus looked down at the small, fragile infant in Rhea's arms, and instead of joy, he felt fear. So he did something terrible. He swallowed the child whole. No sword, no blood, just a quiet, horrifying act. The baby disappeared into him. Rhea screamed, but Cronus would not risk the prophecy coming true. Again and again it happened. Hestia swallowed, Demeter swallowed, Hera swallowed, Hades swallowed, Poseidon swallowed. Each time Rhea gave birth, each time Cronus consumed the child. They were not dead, but trapped inside him, living in darkness. Rhea's sorrow grew heavier with every child lost. She could not bear it any longer. And so, like Gaia before her, she began to plan. When she became pregnant again, she traveled in secret to the island of Crete. There, in a hidden cave, she gave birth to her youngest son, Zeus. This child would not be swallowed. Rhea wrapped a stone in cloth, shaped it like a baby, and brought it to Cronus. Without suspicion, he swallowed the stone, and Zeus was hidden away. In the cave on Crete, he grew in secret, nursed by the goat Amalthea, protected by warriors called the Curetes, who clashed their shields and spears together so that Cronus would not hear the baby's cries. The future king of the gods was being raised in shadows. Far above, Cronus ruled, unaware that fate was already moving toward him. And as Zeus grew stronger, as his mind sharpened and his power awakened, the balance of the universe began to shift. Because the age of the Titans was coming to an end, and soon, a war unlike anything the cosmos had ever seen would begin. cave on the island of Crete was cold and damp, hidden deep within the mountains. Outside, the wind moved through the rocks and trees, carrying the scent of salt from the distant sea. Inside, in the dim light, a child grew. Zeus was not raised like an ordinary child. He was raised in secrecy. Every sound mattered. Every movement was careful. The warriors known as the Curetes guarded him fiercely. When the baby cried, they clashed their bronze shields together, creating loud crashes that echoed through the hills. The noise hid the sound of his voice from Cronus, who ruled far away, unaware that danger was growing in the shadows. The goat Amalthea fed Zeus with her milk, and some stories say that when one of her horns broke, it became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, forever overflowing with food. Even in these small details, Greek myth reminds us that the world of the gods was filled with symbols: abundance, power, fate waiting quietly. Zeus grew quickly. As he became a young god, his strength became clear. His presence filled the cave. His eyes held something sharp and bright, like lightning before it strikes. He learned of the prophecy. He learned what Cronus had done, how his brothers and sisters had been swallowed whole, trapped in darkness inside their father's body. And something inside him hardened. The age of fear would end, but Zeus did not rush forward blindly. In Greek myth, cleverness is often just as important as strength. To defeat Cronus, he would need both. Some stories say that Zeus sought help from Medes, a Titaness known for wisdom and cunning. She gave him a special potion, a mixture strong enough to force Cronus to vomit up what he had swallowed. It would not kill him. It would simply undo his crime. Zeus returned from Crete, no longer a hidden child, but a young god ready to challenge the ruler of the universe. Cronus did not recognize him at first. The Titan king sat upon his throne, confident in his power. He believed the prophecy had been avoided. He had swallowed every child. He thought himself untouchable. But fate does not disappear just because someone tries to hide from it. Zeus approached carefully. He offered Cronus the potion, disguised as a drink. The great Titan swallowed it without suspicion. At first, nothing happened. Then Cronus began to tremble. The ground shook beneath his feet. His body twisted in pain. And one by one, the swallowed gods emerged. First came the stone, the one Rhea had tricked him with. It fell heavily to the ground. Then Hestia. Then Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. They emerged not as infants, but fully grown gods. Immortal beings cannot be destroyed so easily. They had waited in darkness, and now they stood together, blinking in the light. Cronus stared at them in horror. The prophecy was alive. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Zeus stood before his father, no longer hidden, no longer small. The son who had escaped. And in that moment, the age of the Titans cracked open. But overthrowing Cronus would not be simple. The Titans were ancient and powerful. Oceanus, Hyperion, Iapetus, and many others stood loyal to their king. The universe divided itself into sides. On one side, Cronus and the Titans. On the other, Zeus and his freed siblings. The war that followed would be remembered as the Titanomachy. It lasted not days, not months, but 10 long years. Imagine the sky splitting open, mountains shattering, oceans boiling. This was not a war of men with swords. It was a war of cosmic forces. When Titans clashed, the earth trembled. When God struck, thunder rolled across creation. But even with his siblings beside him, Zeus was not yet strong enough to win. So he turned his attention downward to Tartarus, deep below the world, in that dark abyss where Gaia's monstrous children had once been imprisoned. The Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires remained trapped again, cast back into chains by Cronus during his rule. Zeus descended into that darkness. The air there was thick and heavy. No sunlight reached that place. The walls seemed to close in. But Zeus was not afraid. He broke their chains. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, offered him gifts. They were master craftsmen, powerful beyond measure. From their hands came weapons that would shape the future. For Zeus, they forged the thunderbolt. For Poseidon, a trident that could shake the seas and shatter rock. For Hades, a helm of darkness, a helmet that made its wearer invisible. These were not simple tools. They were symbols of dominion. Armed with these weapons, the balance shifted. The Hecatoncheires joined the war, hurling massive stones with their 100 hands, bombarding the Titans without rest. The sky darkened with flying boulders. The air filled with thunder and fire. Zeus raised his thunderbolt for the first time. Lightning split the heavens. The blast lit up the battlefield, revealing Titans roaring in fury, gods standing firm, mountains crumbling into dust. The sea crashed wildly as Poseidon struck with his trident. Hades moved unseen among the chaos, strategic and silent. For 10 years, neither side could claim victory. Then slowly, the Titans began to fall. One by one, they were overpowered. Their strength was immense, but Zeus had something new, something sharper: determination. The final clash shook the foundations of the cosmos. Zeus hurled thunderbolt after thunderbolt. The sound was deafening. Fire rained from the sky. The earth split open. At last, the Titans were defeated. Zeus and his allies bound them in chains and cast them down into Tartarus, the same abyss that had once held the monstrous children of Gaia. The Hecatoncheires were set to guard them, standing watch so that they would never rise again. The age of the Titans was over. Silence followed the war. The sky cleared. The seas calmed. The earth settled. Zeus stood victorious. But victory brought a new question. Who would rule? And how would the world be divided? Zeus and his brothers drew lots to decide their domains. Zeus received the sky. Poseidon claimed the sea. Hades was given the underworld, the realm of the dead, deep beneath the earth. The earth itself would belong to all of them, and high above the world, on a mountain that touched the clouds, they established their home. Mount Olympus. There, the new generation of gods would reign. But peace is fragile in Greek myth. Even as Zeus claimed the sky, even as the thunderbolt rested in his hand, new challenges were already forming. Because Gaia, the ancient earth, was not pleased. Her Titan children had been imprisoned, and she was about to give birth to something far more terrifying than anything the gods had yet faced. A creature so massive, so destructive, that even Zeus would tremble, and his greatest battle was still ahead. Mount Olympus rose above the clouds like a shining crown upon the world. Its peaks touched the heavens. Its slopes were wrapped in mist. From below, humans could only imagine what stood at the summit. They spoke of golden halls, of shining thrones, of music drifting down like soft wind. And in many ways, they were right. The Olympian gods had taken their place. Zeus ruled the sky, lightning resting in his hand. Poseidon commanded the seas, his trident stirring storms beneath the waves. Hades governed the underworld, silent and distant in his shadowed realm. Hera, Demeter, Hestia, and soon others stood among them. A new order had begun, but deep beneath the earth, in places older than Olympus, something was stirring. Gaia had watched the Titanomachy with growing anger. She was the mother of the Titans. They had once ruled the cosmos. Now they were chained in Tartarus, locked away in darkness. The war had not only reshaped the universe, it had wounded her. And Gaia did not forget. From her pain and rage, she brought forth a final child. Typhon. He was not like the Titans. He was not like the Cyclopes. He was something else entirely. A creature of overwhelming chaos. His body was said to stretch so high that his head brushed the stars. From his shoulders rose 100 serpent heads, each hissing, each speaking in different voices. Sometimes human, sometimes animal, sometimes sounds no living creature could recognize. Fire flashed from his eyes. When he moved, mountains shattered. When he roared, the sky itself seemed to tear. Beside him stood Echidna, half woman and half serpent, who would become the mother of many future monsters. Together, they were the beginning of something darker than the Titans, something wild and untamed. Typhon's purpose was simple: destroy Zeus. The first time the gods saw him rising from the earth, they felt something unfamiliar. Fear. The sky darkened not with storm clouds, but with ash. The wind twisted violently. The sea churned without command from Poseidon. Even Olympus trembled. The Olympian gods, powerful as they were still young in their rule. They had defeated the Titans, yes, but Typhon was different. He was not simply a rival king. He was destruction itself. Some myths say that many of the gods fled at the sight of him. They transformed themselves into animals to escape. Apollo became a crow, Artemis a cat, Ares a fish. Even Hera and Aphrodite sought hiding. Only Zeus stood firm. Lightning gathered in his hands. The first clash between Zeus and Typhon shook the world more violently than the Titanomachy. Thunderbolts flew through the sky. Fire met lightning. Serpent heads snapped at the air, spewing flames. The sound was beyond anything mortals could imagine, a mix of storm, earthquake, and roaring beast. Zeus struck again and again, but Typhon was relentless. In some versions of the myth, Typhon managed to wound Zeus. He wrapped his massive coils around him, crushing him, tearing the sinews from his arms and legs. The king of the gods defeated. For a moment, the cosmos seemed to tip toward chaos once more. Typhon carried Zeus away and hid him in a cave, guarded by a monstrous dragon. Without Zeus, the sky fell silent. The order of the world began to weaken. Storms raged without purpose. The earth trembled without reason. But fate had not abandoned Zeus. Hermes, clever and swift, along with Pan, the wild god of shepherds, managed to steal back Zeus's sinews. They restored his strength. Slowly, power returned to his body. Zeus rose again. This time, there was no hesitation. He confronted Typhon in a final battle near Mount Etna in Sicily. The mountain roared as they clashed. Lava burst from the earth. The sky flashed white with endless lightning. Zeus unleashed his full fury. Thunderbolts struck with unstoppable force. Fire met fire. The serpent heads screamed as they were burned away. Typhon staggered. The earth split beneath him. With one final, overwhelming strike, Zeus crushed the monster beneath the mountain. Some say Typhon still lies there, trapped under Mount Etna, and that when the volcano erupts, it is his anger burning beneath the earth. The threat was ended. The Olympian gods returned to their thrones. This time, their rule was secure. Order had triumphed over chaos. But ruling the universe required more than defeating monsters. The gods had to shape the world. They had to shape humanity. And this is where another story begins, not of war between gods, but of a titan who dared to care for mortals. His name was Prometheus. Unlike many titans, Prometheus had sided with Zeus during the Great War. He was clever, thoughtful, different from his brothers. And when the Olympians looked down at the empty earth, Prometheus saw potential. He shaped humans from clay. He formed them carefully, giving them upright posture, lifting their eyes toward the sky. Athena, goddess of wisdom, breathed life into them, and humanity began. At first, humans were weak. They had no protection against cold, no tools, no fire. Fire belonged to the gods. Zeus wanted to keep it that way. But Prometheus looked at the shivering humans and felt something unusual for a titan. compassion. He believed they deserved more, and so, in secret, he climbed to Olympus. He stole a spark of divine fire, hiding it inside a hollow fennel stalk, and carried it down to earth. When humans saw the flame for the first time, everything changed. Fire gave warmth, light, protection, the ability to cook food, to forge metal, to build civilization. It was the beginning of progress. But Zeus was not pleased. The king of the gods valued order, and Prometheus had broken it. He had given mortals a gift meant only for the divine, and Zeus would not allow such defiance to go unpunished. What followed would become one of the most painful and unforgettable punishments in all of Greek myth, and it would also lead to the creation of the first woman. Her name would be Pandora, and her story would change humanity forever. The fire burned bright in the hands of humanity. For the first time, night was no longer complete darkness. Flames danced against cave walls. Shadows moved like living things. The cold lost its sharp bite. Meat cooked over open embers. Metal softened and bent beneath heat. Tools were shaped. Weapons were forged. Civilization had begun. Prometheus watched from a distance. He had given mortals more than warmth. He had given them possibility. But high above, on Mount Olympus, Zeus watched too. The king of the gods was not blind to what had happened. He saw smoke rising from human settlements. He saw sparks glowing in the darkness. He knew exactly who had done this. Prometheus had crossed a line. In Greek myth, power must have order. Mortals were meant to live within limits. Fire was divine. It was not just warmth, it was knowledge, skill, growth, independence. And Zeus understood something important. If humans grew too strong, they might forget their place. So Zeus decided to punish not only Prometheus, but humanity itself. First, he dealt with the Titan. Prometheus was seized and dragged far from Olympus to the edge of the world. There, on a lonely mountain peak, some say in the Caucasus Mountains, Zeus ordered him chained to a rock. The chains were unbreakable. The punishment was not quick. Each day, an eagle, enormous, relentless, descended from the sky. It tore open Prometheus's side and feasted on his liver. The pain was unbearable. And yet Prometheus was immortal. Each night his body healed. Each morning the eagle returned again and again and again, an endless cycle of suffering. The wind howled around him. The sun scorched his skin. Snow fell in winter. Still he endured. But Zeus was not finished. If fire had given humans power, Zeus would give them something else. A gift that did not look like punishment. He ordered Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsmanship, to shape a woman from clay, as Prometheus had shaped men. Athena dressed her in shining garments. Aphrodite gave her beauty that could soften even the hardest heart. Hermes placed charm and curiosity within her mind. Each god added something: a necklace, a voice sweet as music, graceful hands, bright eyes. She was breathtaking. Her name was Pandora, the first woman. But along with these gifts, Zeus placed something else inside her: curiosity. And with her, he sent a sealed jar, often later called a box. Though in the original stories, it was a large container, heavy and closed tight. Pandora was told one simple thing: do not open it. She was sent down to earth as a bride for Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Prometheus had once warned his brother never to accept gifts from Zeus, but Epimetheus saw Pandora and forgot all caution. He welcomed her. At first, life seemed peaceful. Pandora walked among the early humans, her beauty admired, her laughter echoing across valleys. The jar sat in the corner of her home, silent and sealed. Days passed, then weeks, but the jar seemed to call to her. What could be inside? Why was it forbidden? Curiosity began as a whisper. Then it grew louder. It filled her thoughts. It tugged at her mind when she tried to sleep. Just a peek, just a small look. Surely it could not be so terrible. One quiet day, when the world felt still, Pandora approached the jar. Her fingers hovered over the lid. She hesitated. Then she lifted it. In that instant, everything changed. A dark cloud burst from the jar, spreading into the air like smoke. It twisted and expanded, racing outward across the earth. From it poured suffering, disease, pain, jealousy, war, hunger, grief. All the hardships that would define human life escaped into the world. Pandora gasped in horror and slammed the lid shut. But it was too late. The world that had once been simple and golden was now complicated and heavy. Humans cried out as sickness struck their bodies. They argued. They fought. They felt fear and loss for the first time. Pandora fell to her knees beside the jar, trembling. She had not meant to unleash destruction. She had only wanted to know. Inside the jar, something remained, soft, faint, almost unnoticed. Hope. It had not escaped. Whether that was mercy or cruelty is something even the ancient Greeks debated. Some believed that hope staying inside meant it was preserved for humanity. Others believed it meant hope remained out of reach. But one thing was certain: human life would never be the same. Zeus had reshaped the world without throwing a single thunderbolt. Prometheus remained chained, enduring endless torment. Humanity struggled with its new burdens, and the Olympian gods ruled from above, watching how mortals adapted to suffering. Yet even as pain entered the world, humanity did not collapse. They built, they learned, they adapted. Fire burned brighter. Stories were told around its glow, stories of gods, of titans, of creation and punishment. Myths were not just entertainment. They were explanations, ways to understand why life felt both beautiful and cruel. And high on Olympus, new stories were unfolding as well. The gods were not distant, silent rulers. They loved, they argued, they betrayed, they interfered in mortal lives. Zeus himself would soon become known not only as king of the gods, but as a father of heroes, because from his many unions, both divine and mortal, would come children unlike any before. Half god, half human, heroes who would walk the earth and face monsters, heroes who would challenge fate, and one of them, born under strange and dramatic circumstances, would grow into the greatest hero of them all. His name would be Heracles, but before his strength shook the world, his life would begin in danger. And even as a child, he would prove that the age of heroes had arrived. The night Heracles was born, the air felt different. Not darker, not colder, just heavy. In the city of Thebes, a mortal woman named Alcmene lay in labor. She was strong and noble, known for her beauty and loyalty. But the child she carried was no ordinary child. Zeus had come to her in disguise, taking the form of her husband, Amphitryon. Zeus had visited her, while the real Amphitryon was away at war. It was one of many times Zeus allowed desire to guide him, ignoring the consequences that would follow. From that night, Heracles was conceived. When Hera, queen of the gods and wife of Zeus, discovered the truth, her anger burned hotter than fire. Hera had endured Zeus's betrayals before, many times, but this child, half mortal, half god, was living proof of his unfaithfulness. And Hera was not forgiving. She could not strike Zeus directly, but she could strike what he loved. Before Heracles was even born, Hera tried to prevent his arrival. Some stories say she delayed Alcmene's labor, forcing her to suffer for days. Others say she arranged for another child, Eurystheus, to be born first, so that he would hold power over Heracles in the future. Even in birth, fate was being twisted. When Heracles finally entered the world, he did not cry like an ordinary baby. He was large, strong, and quiet, almost watchful. Zeus looked upon his son with pride. Hera looked upon him with hatred. One night, when Heracles was still just an infant lying in his cradle, Hera sent 2 enormous serpents into the nursery. Their scales glistened in the moonlight. Their tongues flicked in the air as they slithered silently across the floor. They moved toward the crib. Inside, 2 babies slept, Heracles and his twin brother Iphicles, who was fully mortal. The serpents raised their heads, but before they could strike, something extraordinary happened. Baby Heracles opened his eyes. He did not scream. He did not cry. Instead, with small hands that already carried unnatural strength, he reached out. 1 serpent in each fist. The creatures twisted violently, their bodies coiling around his arms. Iphicles began to wail in terror, but Heracles squeezed, tighter, tighter, until the serpents fell limp. When Amphitryon and Alcmene rushed into the room, they found the infant calmly holding 2 dead snakes, one in each hand. It was the first sign. This child was different. As Heracles grew, so did his strength. By the time he was a boy, he could lift stones that grown men struggled to move. He ran faster than his companions. His laughter was loud and deep, but his power was not always controlled. Strength without balance can be dangerous. He was trained by many teachers. He learned music, wrestling, archery, but even in learning, his strength sometimes led to disaster. In one story, during a music lesson, his teacher struck him in frustration. Without thinking, Heracles struck back and killed him with a single blow. It was an accident, but it revealed something important. Power must be guided. To temper his strength, Heracles was sent away to live in the countryside, tending cattle and living close to the land. There, he learned patience, discipline, endurance, but Hera had not forgotten him. When Heracles became a young man, strong and respected, he married a woman named Megara. They had children together. For a time, his life felt peaceful. Then Hera struck. She clouded his mind with madness. It came suddenly, like a storm with no warning. Heracles' vision blurred, sounds distorted, his thoughts twisted into fear and rage. He could not tell friend from enemy. In that terrible state, he committed an unthinkable act. He killed his own children. When the madness faded, when clarity returned, he saw what he had done. Silence filled the room. The weight of it crushed him. The strongest man alive fell to his knees, shattered not by a monster, but by guilt. Heracles wanted to die, but death was not his fate. Instead, he sought guidance from the oracle of Delphi. The priestess, speaking with the voice of Apollo, told him that to atone for his crime, he must serve King Eurystheus, the same man Hera had ensured would rule. For 12 years, and during that time, he would complete 12 labors. Tasks so difficult they seemed impossible. Monsters that no one else could defeat. Creatures that had terrorized lands for years. Eurystheus, eager to humiliate Heracles, chose the tasks carefully. Each one designed not only to challenge his strength, but to push him to his limits. The first labor would take him to Nemea. There, a lion roamed the countryside. But this was no ordinary lion. Its fur could not be pierced by blade or arrow. Villages lived in fear. Hunters had failed. Blood stained the hills. Heracles was ordered to kill it. Alone, no army, no assistance, just the man and the beast. As he walked toward Nemea, the weight of his past walked with him. The memory of his children, the shame, the guilt, but also something else. A chance to prove that even someone who has fallen can rise again. The hills of Nemea came into view. The wind carried the distant roar of the lion, and Heracles stepped forward. The first of 12 impossible tasks had begun, and the world would soon witness just how far one hero could go in the name of redemption. The hills of Nemea were quiet, too quiet. Grass bent softly in the wind. Olive trees stood still under the pale sky. But beneath that calm surface, fear lived in every village. Doors were barred before sunset. Shepherds kept their flocks close. No one walked alone. The Nemean lion ruled this land. It was not simply large. It was monstrous. Its golden fur shimmered like metal in the sun. Its claws could tear through shields. Its jaws could crush bone like dry wood. And most terrifying of all, its skin could not be pierced. Arrows bounced off it. Spears shattered against it. It could not be wounded. Heracles entered Nemea without armor. He carried a bow, a club carved from a great olive tree, and nothing else. When he first saw the lion, it stood at the mouth of a cave. Its eyes glowed in the shadow. It did not run. It did not hide. It watched him. Heracles drew his bow. The arrow flew straight and true, striking the lion's shoulder. It snapped, fell harmlessly to the ground. The lion roared. The sound rolled across the hills like thunder. Birds burst from trees. The earth seemed to tremble. Heracles understood. This would not be a fight of weapons. The lion charged. Its speed was shocking. Its weight shook the ground. Heracles leapt aside, the claws slicing through air where he had stood. He struck with his club. The blow echoed like a drumbeat, but the lion barely staggered. The fur was like iron. So Heracles changed his plan. He drove the beast toward its cave, forcing it inside. The space narrowed. The lion's size worked against it in the tight darkness. There, in the shadows, Heracles dropped his weapons. He lunged forward and wrapped his arms around the creature's massive neck. The lion thrashed wildly. Claws tore into his skin. Blood ran down his arms. The cave walls echoed with snarls and grunts. Dust fell from the ceiling. But Heracles tightened his grip. Stronger, stronger, until the roar weakened, until the beast went still. When Heracles emerged from the cave, he carried the lifeless lion across his shoulders. The villagers stared in disbelief. No sword, no arrow, just strength. Later, using the lion's own claws, Heracles managed to skin it. From that day forward, he wore the lion's hide as armor. Its golden fur became his shield. Its head rested over his own, its jaws framing his face. It was not just protection. It was a symbol. The first labor was complete. But King Eurystheus was not impressed. In fact, he was afraid. When Heracles returned with the lion's body, Eurystheus hid inside a large bronze jar, trembling at the sight of him. From then on, he would give his orders from a distance, too frightened to face the hero directly. And so came the second labor. In the swampy region of Lerna lived another creature of terror, the Lernaean Hydra. It was a serpent-like monster with many heads, some say 9, others say more. Its blood was poisonous. Its breath was deadly, and worst of all, when one head was cut off, two more grew back in its place. If the lion had tested strength, the Hydra would test strategy. Heracles traveled to the marshes of Lerna. The air there was thick and foul. The ground sucked at his feet. Mist hung low over dark water. Even the birds avoided the place. The Hydra waited near a twisted tree, its body coiled in the mud. Multiple heads hissed in unison, tongues flicking in and out. Heracles attacked. He swung his sword and severed one head. Instantly, two more burst from the neck. He cut again. 4 heads. The creature's body writhed, striking at him from all sides. Its teeth grazed his arm, and pain burned through him like fire. Even its blood was venomous. This battle would not be won by strength alone. So Heracles called for help. Though he was meant to work alone, his nephew Iolaus had followed him. Seeing the problem, Iolaus acted quickly. Each time Heracles cut off a head, Iolaus burned the neck with a torch. The flame sealed the wound, preventing new heads from growing. One by one, the heads fell, until only one remained. The central head was immortal. Heracles hacked at it relentlessly, finally severing it and burying it deep beneath a massive rock. The Hydra's body lay still. To make the victory complete, Heracles dipped his arrows into the Hydra's poisonous blood. From then on, even a small wound from his arrows would mean certain death. The second labor was finished, but Hera, watching from Olympus, was not satisfied. She sent a giant crab during the battle to distract Heracles, snapping at his feet in loyalty to the Hydra. He crushed it without effort. Later, Hera placed that crab among the stars as the constellation Cancer, a small reward for its loyalty. Even the stars carried stories of this struggle. Labor 3 came next, the Cyrenian hind. This was no monster, no roaring beast. It was a sacred deer with golden antlers and hooves of bronze. It belonged to Artemis, goddess of the hunt. It was swift, impossibly swift, and capturing it would require patience, not violence. Heracles was ordered to bring it back alive. For an entire year, he chased it across mountains and valleys, through forests, over rivers. He did not strike. He did not rush. He waited, observed. Finally, exhausted, the deer stumbled near a river. Heracles gently trapped it without harming it. But as he carried it away, Artemis appeared. Her eyes flashed with anger. How dare he touch her sacred creature? Heracles bowed and explained his task, his punishment, his need for redemption. He did not boast. He did not threaten. He asked for understanding. Artemis, seeing his honesty, allowed him to take the hind, but only if he promised to return it. He did. The third labor was complete. 3 trials, 3 victories. Yet Eurystheus continued to search for greater challenges. Monsters still roamed distant lands, beasts no one else dared face. And as Heracles walked forward, carrying the weight of his past and the skin of a lion across his shoulders. His legend grew, but the next labor would bring him face to face with something even more dangerous than fangs or venom. It would bring him face to face with rage, and the wild boar of Mount Erymanthus was already waiting. Winter had settled over Mount Erymanthus. Snow covered the slopes in thick silence. The wind moved through the trees with a sharp, biting edge. Hunters avoided these mountains, not because of cold, but because of what lived there. The Erymanthian boar. It was massive, larger than any ordinary wild boar. Its tusks curved like sharpened blades. Its hide was thick and scarred from years of battle. When it charged, trees splintered. When it roared, even wolves fled. Villages at the base of the mountain lived in fear. Fields were destroyed. Shepherds vanished. Tracks in the snow told stories of something unstoppable. This was Heracles' fourth labor. He did not need to kill it. He needed to capture it alive. As he climbed the icy slopes, his breath visible in the freezing air, Heracles felt the familiar mix of focus and quiet determination. Each labor was not just a task. It was a step forward, away from guilt, away from the darkness that had once taken control of his mind. But redemption is never simple. On his way to the mountain, Heracles stopped to visit a centaur named Pholus, a friend who lived in a cave nearby. The centaurs were strange beings, half man, half horse, wild and unpredictable. Yet some were wise and kind. Pholus welcomed Heracles warmly. They shared food and conversation, but when Heracles asked for wine, Pholus hesitated. The wine belonged to all centaurs, stored in a large jar. It was not meant to be opened lightly. Heracles insisted. When the jar was opened, the rich scent drifted across the hills. Other centaurs smelled it. Within moments, the peaceful cave turned into chaos. Centaurs charged down the mountainside, enraged, their hooves pounding against rock. They hurled stones and shouted in fury. Heracles, caught off guard, grabbed his bow. His arrows, still tipped with hydra poison, flew through the air. One by one, the centaurs fell. The poison worked instantly. There was no mercy in it. In the confusion, tragedy struck. Pholus, curious about one of the arrows, picked it up to examine it. The arrow slipped from his hand and pierced his foot. A small wound, but hydra venom did not forgive small mistakes. Pholus collapsed and died. Heracles stood frozen. He had not meant for this to happen. Once again, even in victory, there was loss. He buried Pholus with care and continued toward Mount Erymanthus, carrying the weight of yet another unintended death. High in the snow-covered peaks, the boar waited. Heracles tracked it carefully. He followed deep hoofprints in the snow, broken branches, torn earth. Then he heard it, a furious snort. The boar burst from the trees like a storm. Snow exploded around it. Its tusks gleamed white against dark fur. It charged without hesitation. Heracles leapt aside, narrowly avoiding its deadly tusks. The beast turned sharply and charged again. Its speed was terrifying for its size. But Heracles had learned patience. Instead of fighting directly, he drove the boar higher into the mountains, into deeper snow, where its movement slowed. The cold wind howled. The ground became slippery and uneven. The boar grew tired. Its breaths became heavy clouds in the freezing air. At the right moment, Heracles lunged forward and tackled the beast. He wrestled it into the snow, binding its legs with thick chains. The boar thrashed wildly, but exhaustion had weakened it. Finally, it lay still, alive, bound. Heracles carried the struggling creature back down the mountain. When he returned to Mycenae with the enormous boar, Eurystheus, once again, hid in fear inside his bronze jar. The sight of Heracles, wearing the lion's skin, dragging a raging monster behind him, was too much for the king's courage. But Eurystheus was not finished. He had more labors in mind. The fifth task seemed almost simple at first. Clean the stables of King Aegeus. No monsters, no roaring beasts, just filth. But the stables had not been cleaned in 30 years. They housed thousands of cattle. The ground was layered with waste so thick it had hardened like stone. The stench alone was overwhelming. It seemed like a task meant not to test strength, but to humiliate. Eurystheus believed this labor would reduce Heracles to nothing more than a servant. But Heracles did not see humiliation. He saw a problem to solve. Instead of picking up a shovel, instead of laboring for months, he studied the land. Two great rivers flowed nearby, the Alpheus and the Peneus, rivers that carried immense power. Heracles broke through the walls of the stables and redirected the rivers. Water rushed in with unstoppable force. In a single day, the filth of 30 years was swept away. Clean, washed by nature itself, when King Aegeus refused to pay Heracles for the work. For Heracles had originally made a deal for payment. It added yet another insult to the growing list of injustices he endured. Eurystheus, hearing that Heracles had received help from the rivers, refused to count the labor as valid. The king was determined to make the hero suffer longer. So the tasks continued. Sixth labor, the Stymphalian birds. They were not ordinary birds. Their feathers were sharp like bronze blades. Their beaks were strong enough to pierce armor. They nested in the marshes near Lake Stymphalus, terrorizing nearby lands. As Heracles approached the lake, he saw the trees covered in dark shapes. The birds' wings glinted like metal in the sunlight. The marsh was thick and difficult to cross. He could not reach them easily. Then Athena intervened. She gave him a pair of bronze castanets, small, clashing instruments forged by Hephaestus. Heracles climbed to higher ground and shook them. The sharp, metallic sound echoed across the marsh. Startled, the birds rose into the sky, and as they filled the air above him, Heracles drew his bow. Arrow after arrow flew upward, each one tipped with hydra venom. The birds fell from the sky like dark rain. The rest fled far away, never to return. 6 labors complete, 6 victories. Yet the road was far from over. Each task had tested a different part of him: strength, patience, intelligence, endurance. But the next labors would take him beyond Greece itself, to distant lands, to kingdoms ruled by strange kings, to cattle guarded by giants, to horses that fed on human flesh. The world was growing larger with every step he took, and Heracles was becoming more than a man seeking redemption. He was becoming a legend. But legends are not born easily, and ahead, waiting in a foreign land, were mares that screamed not with fear, but with hunger. The sea stretched wide and gray as Heracles sailed toward Thrace. The wind pushed against the sails, carrying the scent of salt and something colder, something distant and unfamiliar. Thrace was a land known for harsh warriors and untamed lands. But Heracles was not traveling there for kings or battle. He was traveling for horses, the mares of Diomedes. They were not ordinary horses bred for speed or war. These mares were wild, massive, and violent. Their eyes burned with madness. Their hooves crushed bone. And worst of all, they fed on human flesh. Their owner, King Diomedes of Thrace, was a cruel man. He delighted in feeding strangers to his horses. The screams of victims echoed across the plains as the beasts tore them apart. This was the 7th labor. Bring back the mares alive. When Heracles arrived, he did not hesitate. He stormed the king's camp with fierce determination. Diomedes' soldiers attacked, but none could stand long against him. Clubs shattered shields. Swords fell from broken hands. In the chaos, Heracles captured Diomedes himself, and then he did something dark. He fed the cruel king to his own horses. The mares, tasting the flesh of their master, grew calmer, as if the madness had been satisfied, as if cruelty had been answered. Heracles bound them in chains. The journey back was not easy. The horses strained against their restraints. Their breath came hot and heavy, but they no longer screamed with hunger. When Heracles delivered them to Eurystheus, the king ordered them set free. Later stories say the mares wandered into the wilderness and were eventually devoured by wild beasts, their violence ending in the same way it began. 7 labors complete, yet Eurystheus had grown more creative in his cruelty. The 8th labor would take Heracles far across the sea again, to the land of the Amazons. The Amazons were not monsters. They were warriors, fierce women who lived without men, skilled in archery and combat. Their queen, Hippolyta, possessed a magical belt, a symbol of her authority and power. Heracles was ordered to bring back that belt. When he he arrived in the land of the Amazons, something unexpected happened. There was no immediate war. Hippolyta met him face to face. She listened as he explained his task. She saw the lion's skin across his shoulders, the calm strength in his posture. She recognized a warrior equal to her own, and she agreed to give him the belt peacefully. It might have ended there, but Hera was watching. Disguised among the Amazons, she spread rumors. She whispered that Heracles had come to kidnap their queen, that he meant to steal more than just a belt. Suspicions spread like fire in dry grass. The Amazons armed themselves. Arrows filled the air. Heracles, believing he had been betrayed, fought back with full force. The battlefield echoed with the clash of blades and the cries of warriors. In the chaos, Hippolyta fell. Only later did Heracles realize the misunderstanding. Hera had once again twisted events. He left the land of the Amazons carrying the belt, but not with the peace he had hoped for. 8 labors, 8 victories. Yet the tasks grew stranger. The 9th labor would push him even farther west, beyond the familiar world of Greece. He was ordered to steal the cattle of Geryon. Geryon was no simple king. He was a giant with 3 bodies joined at the waist, 3 heads, 6 arms, 6 legs, and he guarded his red cattle with a 2-headed dog named Orthrus and a herdsman named Eurytion. To reach Geryon, Heracles traveled to the edge of the known world. The journey was long and brutal. The sun burned hotter the farther he went. At one point, exhausted and angry at the heat, Heracles aimed an arrow at the sky itself, challenging Helios, the sun god. Instead of striking him down, Helios admired the hero's boldness. He lent Heracles a golden cup, a vessel that sailed across the sea like a boat, allowing him to cross waters no mortal ship could survive. At the island of Erythea, Heracles found Geryon's cattle grazing under a red sky. The 2-headed dog charged first. 1 arrow ended it. Then Eurytion fell. Finally, Geryon himself approached. 3 faces glared in fury. 6 arms raised weapons. The ground shook beneath his steps. But Heracles did not fear numbers. He drew a single arrow tipped with hydra venom and fired. The arrow pierced all 3 bodies at once. Geryon fell. The cattle were his. But even this victory did not come without struggle. On the long journey back, Hera sent a gadfly to sting the cattle, scattering them across the land. Heracles spent months gathering them again. Each labor was not just about defeating monsters. It was about endurance, persistence, refusing to give up when the road stretched endlessly ahead. 9 labors complete, 3 remained. But the final 3 would be the most dangerous yet, because they would not simply test strength or courage. They would challenge the boundaries between life and death. The next task would send Heracles into a place few mortals had ever entered, a garden at the edge of the world, a garden guarded by a dragon that never slept. And beyond that, a descent into the underworld itself. Even for the strongest man alive, the path ahead would grow darker. And in that darkness, Heracles would come face to face with something no hero can escape forever: mortality. The sea was restless, even when the sky was clear, even when the wind was calm. The ancient Greeks believed the sea had moods. It could be gentle and shining like silver, or it could rise without warning, dark and furious, swallowing ships whole. And deep beneath those shifting waves ruled one of the most powerful gods of all, Poseidon, brother of Zeus and Hades, one of the three who divided the universe after the fall of Cronus. The sky went to Zeus, the underworld went to Hades, and the sea, the endless, unknowable sea, went to Poseidon. But Poseidon was not only lord of waves, he was the earth shaker. The Greeks believed that when the ground trembled, when buildings cracked and mountains groaned, it was Poseidon striking the earth with his trident. Earthquakes were not natural events. They were the anger of a god. Poseidon lived in a palace beneath the sea. Its walls were said to be made of coral and shining shells. Fish swam through its halls. Sea nymphs danced in its chambers. Strange creatures with horse tails and human bodies guarded its gates. And Poseidon himself rode across the waves in a chariot pulled by immortal horses with golden manes. Wherever his wheels touched water, storms could rise. He was powerful, he was proud, and he was easily offended. One of the most famous stories about Poseidon begins in a growing city, a rocky land in Greece, overlooking the blue Aegean Sea. The people there needed a protector, so two gods came forward, Poseidon and Athena. Both wanted the city. Both wanted its worship. To decide who would rule over it, the gods agreed to a contest. Each would offer the people a gift. The better gift would win. Poseidon stepped forward first. He raised his trident and struck the ground. The earth split open. From the crack burst a powerful spring of water. The people gasped, but when they tasted it, they realized it was salt water, useless for drinking, useless for farming. Still, it showed power. It showed strength. Then Athena stepped forward quietly. She knelt and pressed her hand into the soil. From the ground grew a small tree, thin branches, silvery leaves, hard green fruit, an olive tree. The people looked at it carefully. The olives could be eaten. The oil could be used for cooking, light, and trade. The wood could build homes and ships. It was not dramatic like a crashing spring, but it was wise. And the people chose Athena. The city was named Athens in her honor. Poseidon did not take the loss well. He flooded parts of the land in anger. He punished them with storms. That was the nature of the sea god. He did not forget. He did not forgive easily. And no story shows this better than the long suffering of one man, Odysseus. After the Trojan War ended, Odysseus only wanted one thing: to go home, to return to his island kingdom of Ithaca, to see his wife Penelope, to hold his son Telemachus. But he made one terrible mistake. On his journey home, Odysseus and his men landed on an island. There they encountered a giant, one-eyed creature, the Cyclops named Polyphemus. Polyphemus was not just any monster. He was the son of Poseidon. Odysseus blinded the Cyclops to escape his cave. As he sailed away, he shouted his name proudly. It was a moment of arrogance. Polyphemus lifted his face to the sky and cried out to his father, "Poseidon, avenge me." And Poseidon heard. From that moment on, the sea itself became Odysseus' enemy. Storms shattered his ships. Winds pushed him far off course. Islands that seemed safe became traps. His men died one by one. For 10 long years, Odysseus struggled across the waters. Not because he lacked courage, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he had angered the god of the sea. This is how the Greeks understood their world. The ocean was not random. It had a ruler, and that ruler had emotions. But Poseidon was not only feared, he was worshipped. Sailors prayed to him before voyages. Fishermen offered sacrifices before casting their nets. Cities near the coast built temples in his honor. One of the most beautiful stood at Cape Saunion, overlooking the sea. White columns rising against blue sky. A place where sailors could look up and feel protected, or at least hope to be. Yet the sea was only one part of the world. High above, in forests and mountains, another wild force moved through shadows. Half man, half goat, laughing in the dark. This was Pan. Pan was not like the grand Olympian gods. He did not live in shining palaces. He did not sit on golden thrones. He wandered through forests. He played music on a set of pipes made from reeds. His laughter echoed through valleys. He represented nature untamed, and he carried a strange power. Sudden, overwhelming fear. The Greeks believed that when travelers felt a rush of terror in lonely woods, when their hearts pounded without reason, that was Pan's doing. From his name comes the word panic. Even today, we use it. But Greek myths were not only about gods and monsters. They were also about the beginning of human struggles. Fire, work, hope, and suffering. Long before heroes sailed the seas, there was a titan who dared to help humanity. Prometheus. Prometheus looked at humans and saw weakness. Cold nights, dark caves, no protection against wild beasts. The gods had fire. Humans did not. So Prometheus climbed to Olympus. He stole fire from the gods and carried it down to earth, hidden inside a hollow reed. With fire, humans could cook food. They could forge tools. They could build cities. Fire was knowledge. Fire was power. And Zeus was furious. He chained Prometheus to a rock high in the mountains. Every day, an eagle came and tore at his liver. Every night, it grew back. only for the torment to begin again. Endless punishment for helping humanity. But Zeus was not done punishing humans either. He ordered the creation of the first woman. Beautiful, curious, dangerous. Her name was Pandora, and she carried a jar. Inside it were all the troubles of the world: illness, pain, jealousy, death. When Pandora opened the jar, these things escaped into the world, spreading among humanity. Only one thing remained inside: hope. The Greeks understood life as a mix of suffering and resilience, pain and strength, loss and hope. And through all of it, the gods watched, sometimes helping, often interfering, always present. As the myths continued, heroes would rise again. Creatures would challenge mortals. Gods would fall in love, grow jealous, start wars. And far in the distance, another story waited. A war sparked by pride and desire. A city that would burn, and a wooden horse that would change everything. But before that war begins, we must meet the mortals and gods whose choices set it in motion. And that is where our story turns next. The city of Troy stood on the edge of the sea, its walls high and strong, gleaming under the sun like a promise of safety. Ships bobbed in the harbor, their sails bright with color. Merchants called out from the streets. Children ran through alleys, chasing each other in laughter. From the outside, it seemed a place of peace. But beneath that surface, tension simmered. Fate had already begun to weave its threads, unseen by most. And in the shadows of the palace, one man's desire would ignite a war that would burn for 10 years. Paris, Prince of Troy, son of King Priam, was not a great warrior. He was clever, yes, and handsome, with the kind of charm that made people listen. But he was impulsive, guided by what he wanted rather than what was wise. That desire would soon change the world. It began with a contest among the goddesses. 3 powerful deities, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, appeared before Paris. Each claimed the right to be named the fairest. Their arguments were fierce, voices like thunder rolling across mountains. Paris was chosen as judge, but the goddesses offered him bribes, each one tempting in a different way. Hera promised power. Athena promised wisdom and skill in war. And Aphrodite promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris, young and impulsive, chose love. Aphrodite's promise led him to Helen, Queen of Sparta. Her beauty was unmatched, her presence like sunlight captured in human form. The moment he saw her, he was captivated. He abducted her, or, as some stories say, she left willingly, and brought her to Troy. What followed was inevitable. Men from all over Greece gathered under the banner of Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. The Trojan War had begun. For 10 years, heroes rose and fell. Achilles, nearly invincible, with his mother's love shielding him, became both a terror and a sorrow for the Trojans. Hector, prince and protector of Troy, fought bravely for his people, knowing each battle could be his last. The gods themselves chose sides, interfering openly. Athena whispered strategies to Greeks, while Apollo healed Trojan warriors and sent plagues across their camp. The battlefield was chaos. Dust and blood mixed with screams. Shields clanged, swords shattered, and arrows darkened the skies. The city's walls shook under siege. Families hid in fear while warriors fought in the sun, their armor glinting, their hearts pounding with courage and dread alike. Amid all this, small human stories unfolded. Brothers fell beside each other. Fathers watched sons die. Soldiers pleaded for mercy that rarely came. And through it all, the gods watched, sometimes laughing, sometimes frowning, always reminding mortals that power is never theirs alone. In the 9th year, grief struck the Greek army. Patroclus, close companion to Achilles, donned his armor and rode into battle to rally the troops. He fought with courage unmatched, but he fell to Hector's hand. The loss shattered Achilles, filling him with a rage that could not be contained. Achilles returned to the battlefield, his fury like a storm unleashed. He sought Hector, challenging him to single combat. The duel was brutal. Steel struck steel, sweat mixed with dust and blood. In the end, Hector fell. Achilles' grief and rage were not satisfied. He dragged Hector's body around the walls of Troy, a moment of victory and horror intertwined. Even in triumph, the war was not over. Troy's walls still stood, and hope lingered for the city. But the Greeks were cunning. Odysseus, known for his intellect, devised a plan that would end the siege in a way no warrior could achieve with sword or spear. The Trojan horse, a massive wooden horse, hollowed to hide warriors within. The Greeks pretended to leave, abandoning the horse as an offering to Athena, a token of surrender and peace. The Trojans debated. Some saw it as a gift. Others sensed a trap. But curiosity, pride, and the promise of glory prevailed. They brought the horse inside the city walls. At night, while the city slept, the warriors emerged from the horse. The gates were opened from within. Greek soldiers poured into Troy, silent as shadows, deadly as vipers. Fires were set. Shouts filled the air. The city burned. Houses crumbled. Families were slaughtered or captured. Troy, once proud and seemingly eternal, fell under the cunning of mortals and the will of the gods. Helen, the spark of this war, returned to Sparta with Menelaus. Victory and loss intertwined. The war ended, but the scars remained on the land, on the people, and in memory. Greek myths are filled with such contrasts. Bravery and folly, love and vengeance, life and death. They remind us that humans, though small before gods and monsters, carry the weight of choices, the consequences of actions, and the echoes of the divine in every triumph and tragedy. The stories do not end with Troy. Across Greece, tales of heroes like Theseus, Perseus, and Orpheus unfold. Monsters lurk in shadows. Gods meddle in human affairs. Mortals face impossible tasks. And every act of courage, every misstep, every fleeting joy or sorrow adds to the tapestry of myth that shapes how we understand the world. For the Greeks, myth was more than story. It was warning, instruction, wonder, and memory all at once. And as the centuries passed, these myths traveled from fireside to parchment, from the hills of Athens to distant lands, carrying lessons of courage, hubris, love, and the eternal struggle between mortals and the divine. Even now, when we walk through ruins, when we look at ancient texts, when we see stars shaped like the monsters and heroes of old, we are walking in the shadows of those myths, listening to the whispers of gods, and feeling the pulse of heroes who lived not only in their time, but forever in story. And as the tales continue, new heroes rise, new monsters emerge, and the dance between human courage and divine continues endlessly, waiting for the next listener, the next dreamer, to step into the world of Greek myth. Even after the fall of Troy, the world of Greek myths continued to unfold with stories that blurred the line between mortal and divine. The echoes of war faded, but they left scars on the earth, on cities, and in the hearts of those who survived. Heroes returned home, some triumphant, some broken, and each faced a world forever changed. Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, was not among those fortunate enough to return easily. The gods had decided that his journey would be long and torturous. 10 years of war had already drained him, but 10 more years of wandering would test his mind, his body, and his soul. The sea, ruled by Poseidon, was unforgiving. Storms rose without warning. Waves struck his ship with the strength of mountains. And yet, Odysseus pressed forward, guided by determination, cleverness, and a desire to return to his wife Penelope. Along his journey, he encountered wonders and horrors alike. First came the lotus eaters, a people whose fruit caused forgetfulness. His men, upon tasting it, wanted nothing more than to stay and abandon their journey. Odysseus, with firm hands and a heavy heart, dragged them back to the ship, reminding them that memory and purpose were stronger than fleeting pleasure. Then, the sirens. Their voices were beautiful, irresistible, promising knowledge, pleasure, and secrets of the world. Many sailors had been lured to death by these songs. Odysseus, clever and cautious, ordered his men to plug their ears with beeswax and tied himself to the mast so that he could hear the voices without surrendering to them. The waves crashed around him. The music whispered in his ears, but he survived, carried by discipline and foresight. Next came Scylla and Charybdis, 2 monsters guarding opposite sides of a narrow strait. Scylla, with 6 heads, snatched sailors from the deck. Charybdis, a massive whirlpool, threatened to swallow the entire ship. Odysseus made a desperate choice, steering closer to Scylla, losing a few men rather than all, even in sacrifice. He was a master of strategy, showing that heroism is often a balance of courage and grim decision. The journey took him further, to the island of Helios, the sun god, where cattle grazed untouched. His men, driven by hunger and greed, disobeyed orders and slaughtered the sacred animals. The consequences were swift. Zeus, the king of gods, sent a storm that shattered the ship. Only Odysseus survived, clinging to wreckage, carried by the mercy of gods, who were not entirely cruel. Eventually, he reached Aegea, the island of the nymph Calypso, who fell in love with him. She offered immortality, love, and comfort, a life free from suffering. Odysseus, however, remembered Penelope. Even in paradise, he chose his mortal life and his family over divine temptation. Years later, with the help of Hermes, the messenger god, he finally departed. Each step of Odysseus' journey reflected the essence of Greek myth. Humans striving against odds, gods intervening with whim and will, and the constant test of character. Strength alone could not win the day. Wisdom, patience, and perseverance were equally crucial. Meanwhile, in other lands, new heroes rose to challenge fate and monsters. Perseus, armed with a reflective shield and winged sandals, faced Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone. The moment was tense. Her snake-like hair writhed, eyes deadly, fangs bared. Perseus approached slowly, keeping his gaze on the shield's reflection, striking at the perfect moment and severing her head. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, a symbol of hope and the unexpected rewards of courage. Orpheus, a mortal gifted with the lyre, descended into the underworld to retrieve his wife Eurydice. His music was so beautiful that even Hades, lord of the dead, paused to listen. Orpheus won permission to take Eurydice back, but with one condition. He must not look at her until they reached the world above. The journey upward was long, the shadows deep. One glance, one fatal moment of doubt, and Eurydice was lost forever. Orpheus, grief echoed through the ages, a reminder that love and tragedy are inseparable. Greek myths were not merely about monsters and heroes. They were about the choices mortals made, the consequences they faced, and the forces beyond their control. Humans were rarely powerless, but they were never free from the touch of gods. Their stories were a mirror of ambition, pride, love, vengeance, and resilience. Even in tragedy, there was meaning. In loss, there was learning. In suffering, there was endurance. And in every tale, from the cleverness of Odysseus to the tragedy of Orpheus, the Greeks found a reflection of their own lives, fleeting, uncertain, but filled with possibility. And as the world continued, new myths emerged. Stories of kings and queens, of gods and monsters, of cities that rose and fell. each myth building on the last, creating a tapestry of human and divine drama that would survive through centuries. From the storms of Poseidon to the cunning of Odysseus, from the terror of monsters to the wisdom of Athena, the myths of Greece were never just stories. They were warnings, inspirations, lessons, and wonders. And in listening to them, generations learned not only of the past, but of the eternal struggle between ambition, courage, and the forces beyond human control. Yet even as these tales concluded for some heroes, the world of Greek myths was far from complete. New generations would face gods' whims. New monsters would emerge from dark forests and shadowed seas. And somewhere in distant lands, the next great adventure was already waiting, ready to test the courage, the wit, and the heart of those daring enough to step into the realm where myth and reality entwined. The stage was set, the gods watched, the earth trembled, and the stories, endless and infinite, continued, far to the north of the familiar Greek lands, where mountains sliced the sky and rivers ran like silver threads. Another tale unfolded, a story that intertwined gods, mortals, and the forces of nature in a way that would shape the understanding of life, death, and fate. It began with a man named Bellerophon. Not a king, not a warrior of the first rank, but clever, ambitious, and gifted with courage that bordered on recklessness. Bellerophon's destiny was tied to one of the most fearsome creatures ever to walk the earth, the Chimera. The Chimera was not merely an animal. It was a living nightmare, a monstrous hybrid with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent. Flames burst from its mouth, and its roar shook mountains. Entire villages had vanished at its passage. Fields burned before it, and rivers ran red with the blood of those who dared oppose it. Bellerophon's task was clear: slay the Chimera. Yet, like many Greek myths, the path was never straightforward. The king who ordered the deed, Japanese letter, IOBAT, Japanese letter, S, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Chai, Japanese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Chinese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter, Japanese letter. Hoped Bellerophon would perish. To him, sending a man against such a beast was not a labor, but a sentence. Before confronting the monster, Bellerophon sought aid from the gods. He prayed to Athena, wise and ever watchful. In answer, she gave him a gift, a golden bridle, not ordinary by any means, for it allowed him to tame the untamable Pegasus, the winged horse, born from the blood of Medusa. Pegasus could soar above mountains and rivers, faster than any mortal vessel. When Bellerophon first approached Pegasus, the horse reared and snorted, wings beating like thunder against the sky. Many would have faltered, but Bellerophon calmed him with the bridle, speaking softly, showing patience and courage. Pegasus, recognizing strength and purpose, submitted. Together they rose into the heavens, wings slicing through clouds. From above, Bellerophon saw the chimera. It moved through valleys like a shadow, its roar echoing endlessly. Flames licked at the rocks and trees. The stench of smoke and blood filled the air. The sight was terrifying. Mortals would have fled. Yet Bellerophon, mounted on Pegasus, approached steadily. The battle was not one of brute force alone. Bellerophon used strategy, the wisdom gifted by Athena, and the speed of Pegasus to strike from angles the chimera could not anticipate. He avoided the lion's jaws, the goat's hooves, and the serpent's snapping tail. And finally, drawing a lead-tipped spear, he drove it deep into the beast's throat. Fire sputtered and died. Smoke drifted into the wind. The chimera fell motionless, a mountain of defeated terror. Bellerophon had triumphed. Yet, as often in Greek myths, victory carried consequences. Pride took root in his heart. He believed himself capable of ascending to Olympus itself, riding Pegasus among the gods. But Zeus, ever vigilant, would not allow mortal arrogance to go unchecked. Pegasus reared, and Bellerophon was thrown from the sky. He fell to the earth, broken, humbled, and mortal once more. Even heroes could not escape the limits of their humanity, while Bellerophon's story teaches the dangers of pride. Elsewhere in Greece, tragedy often mingled with love. Take Orpheus, whose descent into the underworld to reclaim Eurydice symbolized both devotion and the harsh truth of mortal limits. Or the tale of Phaethon, son of Helios, who tried to drive the sun chariot and lost control, scorching the earth and falling to his death. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were reminders that human ambition, even when noble, must respect the forces beyond mortal understanding. And yet, not all myths ended in punishment. Some celebrated ingenuity and cunning. Take Daedalus and his son Icarus, trapped in King Minos' labyrinth. Daedalus, a master craftsman, built wings of feathers and wax. They could escape the maze and fly free, but Icarus, thrilled by the sky, ignored his father's warnings and flew too close to the sun. The wax melted, and he plunged into the sea. Here again, the lesson was clear. Freedom and ambition are powerful, but recklessness carries cost. Greek myths also explored the thin line between mortal desires and divine interference. Gods were not distant observers. They acted, often selfishly, often with favor or malice. Aphrodite could cause love that brought ruin. Ares could inspire violence that destroyed cities. And yet, in these interactions, humans were not merely pawns. Their courage, decisions, and flaws shaped the outcomes, proving that even in a world dominated by divine power, mortal agency had meaning. tapestry of myths grew ever richer with time, from the cunning of Odysseus to the bravery of Bellerophon, from the pride of Icarus to the loyalty of Orpheus. The stories encompassed the full spectrum of human emotion and experience. They reflected triumph and failure, beauty and terror, hope and despair. And as centuries passed, these myths became more than stories. They became lessons encoded in the culture, guiding behavior, inspiring art, and shaping the collective imagination of generations. Temples were built, statues carved, songs composed, and the tales were passed down around fires, in courts, and through scrolls. But even as the old stories endured, the Greeks continued to imagine new challenges, new heroes, and new monsters. The cycle of myth was eternal. For every hero who succeeded, there was one who failed. For every monster slain, another emerged. And in each tale, the line between mortal and divine, between courage and folly, was tested and retested. The world of Greek myths was vast and unending, a place where the impossible became reality, and where every choice carried weight. And in this endless expanse, every listener, every reader, every dreamer could find a reflection of themselves, facing challenges, learning lessons, and striving against all odds to leave their mark on the world. Yet even as Bellerophon, Odysseus, and the others completed their journeys, the gods were far from done. The next stories would carry mortals even deeper into the shadows of fate, into realms where life and death, love and vengeance, power and humility, intertwined in ways no one could fully predict. The stage was set for the final, most profound tales of Greek myth, where heroes, gods, and monsters would collide in ways that would echo through eternity. In the quiet hours of night, when the stars hung like silver lanterns over Greece, the stories of the past seemed to breathe. The air itself felt alive with whispers of gods and heroes, of love and vengeance, of triumph and sorrow. And in one of the most haunting myths, humans were reminded of both the fragility and the stubbornness of mortal life. The story of Persephone, daughter of Demeter, and the descent into the underworld. Persephone was young and radiant, a maiden whose laughter could make flowers bloom. She wandered through fields, picking blossoms under the watchful eyes of her mother, Demeter, goddess of the harvest. The land thrived under Demeter's care. Crops grew tall and golden. Rivers sparkled in the sun. People celebrated abundance, knowing the earth's bounty was a gift of the gods. But beneath the beauty of the earth lurked shadows. Hades, god of the underworld, watched the world above with an envy known only to those who ruled the dead. He desired Persephone, not for conquest alone, but for companionship, for the warmth and light she carried. And so, one day, as Persephone reached for a flower, a narcissus of unmatched beauty, the earth split open. Dark chasms yawned beneath her feet. Before she could scream, Hades appeared, swift and merciless, and carried her into his dark kingdom below. Demeter's grief was boundless. She searched the earth tirelessly, mourning her daughter's absence. Crops withered, rivers dried, famine spread. The world fell into despair, humans suffering growing as the goddess's sorrow touched every village, every field, every hearth. Mortals cried out to the gods for relief, but even they could not sway Demeter's heart. Zeus, ever watchful, intervened. He could not ignore the pleas of mortals, nor could he fully oppose Hades, his brother. A compromise was struck, and the cycle of life and death, light and shadow, was forever intertwined. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld with Hades, and part of the year with her mother on earth. And so the seasons were born. Spring and summer, when Persephone returned, were times of life, abundance, and joy. Autumn and winter, when she descended into darkness, were times of dormancy, sorrow, and reflection. The Greeks explained the changing world through myth, weaving human experience into the eternal dance of gods and nature. Yet, the underworld held more than sorrow. It was a realm of immense complexity, a place where mortals, heroes, and spirits alike confronted the finality of life. Rivers like Styx and Lethe wound through its depths. Guardians and punishments awaited the unwise. And yet, even there, hope and mercy could appear. Heroes such as Heracles descended to retrieve souls or objects, demonstrating that courage and persistence could transcend death itself. One of the most famous journeys into the underworld was that of Orpheus, whose music softened the hearts of Hades and Persephone themselves. Through his lyre, he spoke to the dead, bridging the gap between mortal desire and divine law. But even Orpheus was bound by rules he could not break, reminding listeners that even extraordinary courage could be tempered by fate. This story, like so many in Greek myth, emphasized balance, life and death, joy and grief, mortal ambition, and divine will each existed in tension. To disregard one was to invite catastrophe. To respect each was to understand the delicate fabric of existence. And as the tales unfolded, humans saw reflections of themselves. Persephone's longing mirrored their own separations from loved ones. Demeter's grief reflected their despair at loss. Hades' desire reminded them of the shadows that lingered even in the brightest moments. Greek myths were never distant. They were mirrors, warnings, and guides, embedded in every human heart. But the underworld was not the only realm where such lessons were learned. Mount Olympus, home to gods like Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, remained a stage for drama, conflict, and intrigue. Love and jealousy intertwined. Mortals were rewarded or punished for their choices. Heroes rose and fell not only by strength, but by cunning, humility, and sometimes by sheer luck. And while humans walked the earth below, the stories of gods and heroes shaped their understanding of justice, power, and destiny. Myths reminded them that no deed was without consequence, that even the smallest choices could ripple across the heavens, and that courage was not simply bravery in battle, but wisdom in action, compassion in heart, and endurance through suffering. The Greeks, through these stories, created a world that was alive in every sense, where forests could conceal danger and wonder, where rivers could purify or curse, where the sun could inspire awe or anger, and where mortals and gods danced an endless dance of fate. And as the night deepened, as stars traced silent paths across the sky, one truth became clear. These myths were eternal. They were not merely stories to entertain. They were echoes of human experience, immortalized through heroes, monsters, and gods. And for those willing to listen, to watch, to imagine, the world of Greek myth was never silent. It breathed, it moved, it challenged, and somewhere beyond mortal sight, the next story waited, ready to test courage, wit, and heart. A tale that would remind humans again that life, with all its beauty and terror, is always intertwined with forces far greater than themselves, even as the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened across the hills and seas of ancient Greece. The stories of gods, monsters, and mortals continued to echo, not as mere tales, but as living memories, carrying lessons, warnings, and wonders through time. And no story better embodies the full weight of Greek myth than that of the great hero Heracles, son of Zeus, whose life was a storm of triumph, suffering, and relentless struggle. From birth, Heracles was marked by both divinity and danger. Zeus, in his boundless desire, had fathered the child with Alcmene, a mortal woman, and Hera, Zeus's jealous wife, loathed him. Even as an infant, Heracles faced Hera's wrath. She sent serpents into his cradle, intending to end his life before it began. Yet the child, already demonstrating extraordinary strength, strangled them with his tiny hands. It was the first of many signs. This was a hero not born, but forged by adversity. Heracles' life was never simple. The Greeks believed that the hero's destiny would be a mixture of glory and suffering. Hera, determined to test him, inflicted madness upon him. In a frenzy, he killed his own family. The grief and horror of this act drove him to seek redemption. And thus began the 12 labors, a series of challenges so perilous that even the bravest warriors would falter. Each labor was a testament to the blending of courage, cunning, and endurance. The Nemean lion, whose golden fur could not be pierced by any mortal weapon, required Heracles to rely not on sword or spear, but on sheer strength, grappling the beast until its roar was silenced forever. The Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with multiple heads that regrew when severed, demanded both strategy and precision. Heracles learned that sometimes fire and cleverness could achieve what brute force could not. The challenges escalated, capturing the Cyrenian hind with golden antlers, cleaning the Augean stables in a single day, retrieving the girdle of the Amazon queen, each task a puzzle of endurance, ingenuity, and moral trial. With every labor, the hero demonstrated that greatness was not simply born from power, but from perseverance in the face of impossible odds. And yet, as always in Greek myth, victory came intertwined with consequence. Even as Heracles achieved feats beyond ordinary men, he faced suspicion, fear, and sorrow. Mortals revered him, yes, but they also envied him. Gods observed him, some aiding, some plotting. His life was a constant balance of triumph and torment, a reflection of the human struggle magnified to divine proportions. Heracles' final labor, capturing Cerberus, the three-headed hound of Hades, took him to the realm of the dead itself. There, he did not confront the beast with anger alone, but with humility, negotiating with Hades and Persephone, showing that even a hero of immense strength must exercise wisdom and respect when facing forces beyond his own. Through Heracles, the Greeks taught that heroism is never simple. Strength alone is insufficient. Courage must be guided by judgment. Triumph often comes at the cost of suffering, and immortality of fame is entwined with mortal loss. Yet, Greek myths are not only about punishment or glory. They are about connection between the gods and humans, between actions and consequences, between the present and the eternal. They explore love, jealousy, pride, sacrifice, and redemption. They remind us that life, even in its chaos, carries lessons if we are willing to see them. And as the sun rose over the hills, bathing the ruins of temples and the fields of ancient cities in gold, the echoes of these myths remained. The laughter of gods, the cries of heroes, the whispers of mortals, and the shadows of monsters lingered in every stone and river, in every gust of wind and wave against the shore. Greek myths endure because they speak to the timeless human experience. They tell of our strengths, our flaws, our dreams, and our fears. They show us that even when faced with monsters, storms, and divine wrath, humanity can endure, learn, and grow. That courage, wisdom, and hope can shine even in the darkest places. And so, from the heights of Olympus to the depths of the underworld, from the raging seas ruled by Poseidon to the forests haunted by Pan, the world of Greek myths stretches on infinite, intricate, and alive. Every hero who struggles, every mortal who dreams, every god who schemes, continues to teach us, challenge us, and inspire us. For in these stories, we find ourselves, mortal, striving, faltering, yet endlessly reaching for something greater. The myths of Greece are not confined to history. They live in us, in our courage, in our wonder, and in the eternal search for meaning amidst the vast, unpredictable world we call life. And though this chapter of our journey through Greek myths concludes, the stories themselves are never finished. They wait in every whisper of the wind, every flicker of firelight, every shadow along a quiet path, inviting us, daring us to step closer, to listen, and to imagine once more.